On June 28, 1914, a driver made a wrong turn. 10 seconds later, 20 million people were dead. In October 1962, a submarine officer said no, 2 words, and the world did not end in nuclear fire. In 1928, a scientist forgot to wash a dish. That unwashed dish has since saved over 200 million lives. History is not decided by armies. It is not decided by empires. It is not decided by the most powerful people in the room. History is decided in moments, seconds. Single decisions made by ordinary people who had no idea that everything was about to change. Tonight, 5 moments. Each one lasted less than a minute. Each one rewrote the future. And every single one of them came down to something so small, so completely ordinary, that the people involved almost didn't notice it happening. Almost. June 28, 1914. Sarajevo, Bosnia. It is a Sunday morning, and it also happens to be the 14th wedding anniversary of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his wife, Sophie. Franz Ferdinand has come to Sarajevo in his official capacity as Inspector General of the Austro-Hungarian Army. It is a politically tense visit. Bosnia had been annexed by Austria-Hungary just 6 years earlier. Serbian nationalists resent the occupation deeply. And the date, June 28th, is the anniversary of a medieval battle considered a day of mourning in Serbian national memory. The assassination plot has been in place for weeks. 6 young conspirators, members of a nationalist movement called Young Bosnia, are positioned along the announced motorcade route through the city. At approximately 10:15 in the morning, one of them, Nedeljko Chabrinovic, throws a grenade at the Archduke's open-topped car. It bounces off the folded roof and explodes under the vehicle behind. Several people are wounded. The Archduke and Sophie are unhurt. Franz Ferdinand does something unexpected. He orders the motorcade to stop, steps out, and goes back to check on the wounded. Then he continues to City Hall for the scheduled reception. After the reception, Franz Ferdinand makes a decision. He wants to visit the hospital to see the people injured in the bombing. The motorcade sets off. But here is where everything falls apart. The drivers are Czech speakers. The orders about the changed route are given in German. The lead driver does not receive, or does not understand, the instruction to take a different road. He turns right onto Franz Josef Street, the wrong street entirely. Governor Potiorek, riding in the car, immediately shouts that the driver has made a wrong turn. The driver brakes. The car slows to a stop, and then stalls as it attempts to reverse. At that exact moment, Gavrilo Princip is standing on the pavement nearby. He had been part of the original assassination group that morning. After Chabrinovic's failed grenade attack, Princip had assumed the mission was over. He was 19 years old, slight in build, rejected by the Serbian army for being too small. He was standing just meters from where the car stopped. He could not believe what he was seeing. The Archduke's open car, the target he had given up on that morning, was sitting completely still, directly in front of him, at a distance of less than 2 meters. Princip stepped forward and fired twice with a Browning semi-automatic pistol. The first bullet struck Sophie. The second struck Franz Ferdinand in the neck. Both wounds were fatal. The imperial couple were dead by 11:30 that morning. 1 month later, on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Within weeks, the alliance system that had been building across Europe for decades pulled every major power into the conflict. What followed was 4 years of industrial warfare that killed an estimated 17 million people and destroyed 4 empires. It all began with a driver who did not understand an order given in the wrong language, and a car that stopped in the wrong place at the wrong moment. October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, the United States and the Soviet Union stood at the edge of nuclear war, and the world held its breath. Most people know the story on the surface: Kennedy and Khrushchev. diplomats and politicians negotiating in Washington and Moscow, the missiles in Cuba, the naval blockade. What almost nobody knew at the time, and what remained secret for nearly 40 years, was that the most dangerous moment of the entire crisis did not happen in a government building. It happened inside a submarine. On October 1st, 1962, 4 Soviet Foxtrot-class diesel submarines left their base on the Kola Peninsula in secret. Each submarine carried 22 torpedoes, and one of those torpedoes carried a nuclear warhead with roughly the same destructive power as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Their destination was the Cuban port of Mariel. Their mission was to establish a permanent Soviet naval presence 90 miles from the American coastline. By October 27th, the most dangerous day of the entire crisis, one of those submarines, designation B-59, had been located by the United States Navy. 11 American destroyers and an aircraft carrier had surrounded it in international waters, unable to surface, unable to communicate, running deeper and deeper to avoid the search. And then the Americans began dropping depth charges. They were signaling charges, low-powered explosives used as a signal to force a submarine to surface. The Americans were not attacking, but inside B-59, nobody knew that. The submarine had been submerged and evading for days. There had been no contact with Moscow. The crew had been listening to American civilian radio broadcasts to try to understand what was happening in the world above them. But at depth, they could receive nothing. They were completely cut off. The temperature inside the submarine had risen to between 45 and 50 degrees Celsius. Carbon dioxide levels were dangerously high. 78 men could barely breathe. The batteries that powered the submarine were nearly exhausted. Captain Valentin Savitsky had reached his limit, convinced that war had already begun, that the depth charge detonations meant the attack had started. He gave the order to prepare the nuclear torpedo for launch. The political officer agreed. On any other Soviet submarine in that flotilla, that would have been enough. 2 signatures, launch authorized. But B-59 was the flagship of the submarine brigade, and aboard B-59, there was a 3rd officer whose signature was also required, Vasily Arkhipov, the chief of staff of the entire submarine detachment. Arkhipov refused. An argument broke out in the suffocating heat of the submarine's control room. Savitsky was certain. The political officer was certain. Arkhipov stood alone, calm, certain in the other direction. He argued that the detonations were signals, not attacks, that surfacing was the correct decision, that launching a nuclear weapon without confirmed orders from Moscow was not something any of them had the authority to do. The argument lasted long enough for Savitsky to reconsider. B-59 surfaced on the night of October the 27th, surrounded immediately by American warships and aircraft. It had done so without firing its torpedo. Nobody on the American side knew how close it had come. The United States Navy did not even know the Soviet submarines were carrying nuclear weapons. The story stayed secret for almost 40 years. It only became public knowledge in 2002, when surviving crew members finally spoke at a conference marking the 40th anniversary of the crisis. Thomas Blanton, director of the National Security Archive at George Washington University, summarized it simply. He said, "A guy called Vasily Arkhipov saved the world. 1 officer, 1 refusal, in a submarine nobody knew about. On a day the world came closer to nuclear war than it has ever come before or since." August 9th, 1945, 3 days after the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The Second World War in the Pacific is entering its final and most devastating chapter. At 3:47 in the morning, a B-29 Superfortress bomber named Boxcar lifts off from the island of Tinian in the Pacific. In its bomb bay sits Fat Man, a plutonium bomb with the explosive power of 21,000 tons of TNT, the most destructive single weapon ever carried by an aircraft. The primary target is the city of Kokura, a city of 178,000 people on the island of Kyushu, home to one of the largest military arsenals in Japan. The mission orders are clear. The bomb must be dropped visually. The bombardier must be able to see the target with his own eyes. There will be no radar bombing. The flight to Japan takes nearly 7 hours. But problems begin before Boxcar even reaches its target. A fuel transfer pump has failed before takeoff. 2,400 liters of reserve fuel are inaccessible, sitting in a tank the crew cannot use. And at the designated rendezvous point off the Japanese coast, one of the 2 accompanying B-29s fails to appear. Boxcar circles for 40 minutes waiting. 40 minutes of fuel burn, 40 minutes of delay. By the time Boxcar arrives over Kokura, it is already running behind schedule. And above Kokura, the sky is not clear. The previous day, 224 American B-29s had firebombed the nearby city of Yahata. The smoke from those fires had drifted overnight and now hung over Kokura in thick, dark clouds. 70% of the city was covered. The bombardier could not see the target. Major Sweeney brought Boxcar around for a first bomb run. The target was obscured. He brought it around for a second run, still obscured. A third run. Japanese anti-aircraft guns were finding their range below. Japanese fighter aircraft were being scrambled, and the target still could not be seen. 50 minutes over Kokura. 3 failed bomb runs, fuel critically low, anti-aircraft fire getting closer. No visual on the target. Major Sweeney made the decision. They would divert to the secondary target. 20 minutes later, Boxcar arrived over Nagasaki. The bomb was dropped at 11:02 in the morning local time. It exploded 1,650 feet above the city. The destruction was immediate and total across a wide area. Tens of thousands of people died. Kokura was spared. Not by defense, not by strategy, not by any decision made by anyone on the ground, by smoke, drifting overnight from fires in a neighboring city, by clouds that happened to be in the right place at the right time. The residents of Kokura have a phrase for this. They call it Kokura's luck, the city that the atomic bomb could not find. In the summer of 1928, a Scottish bacteriologist at St. Mary's Hospital in London left for his annual holiday. Before leaving, he had been working on cultures of Staphylococcus aureus, a common bacterium responsible for serious infections, including blood poisoning, pneumonia, and meningitis. He left several culture plates on the corner of his laboratory bench, not in the incubator, just on the bench, and he went to Suffolk for the summer. When he returned to his laboratory on September 3rd, 1928, he began sorting through the culture plates he had left behind. Most were routine. Then he picked up one plate that was different. The plate had become contaminated with a mold during his absence. That was not unusual. Laboratory contamination happened. What was unusual was what the mold had done to the bacteria around it. There was a clear ring of empty space around the mold colony. Every bacterium within that ring was dead, not inhibited, not weakened, dead. The mold was producing some substance that was killing bacteria completely. Fleming held the plate up to the light and said, according to his laboratory assistant who was present, "That's funny." He did not throw the plate away. He did not clean it. He looked at it more carefully. Fleming identified the mold as belonging to the genus Penicillium. He grew it in pure culture and confirmed that the broth it produced had a powerful antibacterial effect. He named the active substance penicillin after the mold that produced it. He published his findings in 1929. His colleagues showed almost no interest. The scientific community largely ignored the paper for the next decade. But Fleming kept the original mold culture alive in his laboratory for 12 years. He distributed samples to any chemist who showed interest. He never stopped believing that what he had found mattered. He was right. In 1940, 12 years after that contaminated plate, a team of scientists at Oxford University, led by Howard Florey and Ernst Chain, took Fleming's neglected discovery and developed a method to purify and produce penicillin in usable quantities. In 1941, they conducted the first clinical trial. A patient dying of a severe bacterial infection began to recover. The results were extraordinary. By the end of World War II, penicillin was being produced on an industrial scale and deployed across every Allied theater of war. Infections that had killed soldiers for centuries were being cured within days. Fleming, Florey, and Chain shared the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 1945. The contaminated plate that Fleming almost discarded has since been described as the single greatest victory ever achieved over disease. The mold that killed bacteria on an unwatched laboratory bench has been estimated to have saved over 200 million lives. It began because a scientist went on holiday and came back curious instead of annoyed. The previous 4 moments in this video all happened in seconds. A wrong turn, a word of refusal, a cloud, an unwashed dish. This one took 20 years, and it still changed everything. In 1944, an American agronomist from a small Iowa farming family arrived in Mexico with one assignment: fix the wheat. Mexican wheat was failing. The plants grew tall and thin, so tall that when fertilizer was added to increase yield, the stalks bent under the weight of their own grain and collapsed. More fertilizer meant more failure. Farmers were trapped. The agronomist spent years crossing thousands of wheat varieties. He developed a new approach, breeding wheat with shorter, stronger stems that could hold heavy grain heads without collapsing. He also pioneered a technique of growing 2 crops per year in different climate zones simultaneously, cutting the development time for new varieties in half. By 1963, 95% of Mexico's wheat used his varieties. The country tripled its wheat production. But the real test came in the mid-1960s. India and Pakistan were facing catastrophic food shortages driven by rapid population growth. Experts predicted mass famine was unavoidable. Hundreds of millions of people faced starvation. The agronomist flew to India personally and oversaw the introduction of his wheat varieties on a massive scale. In 1966, India imported 18,000 tons of his seed, the largest single seed purchase in history. Pakistan imported 42,000 tons the following year. The results were extraordinary. Both countries saw harvests increase by 60% within years. India and Pakistan, countries that had depended on imported food aid for decades, became agriculturally self-sufficient. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. His work is estimated to have prevented the starvation deaths of up to 1 billion people. He continued working in the field until he was well into his 80s. When asked why he kept going, he said, "You can't be complacent in a hungry world." He died in 2009 at the age of 95, still working. 5 moments, 5 ordinary people, 5 seconds or 5 years that rewrote the future. A driver who made a wrong turn, a submarine officer who said no, a cloud that drifted overnight, a scientist who came back curious, a farmer's son who kept growing wheat long after anyone expected him to stop. None of them knew they were making history. That's the point. History is not made by people who know they are making it. It is made in the moment before anyone realizes what is happening. in the wrong turn, in the refusal, in the curiosity that keeps someone from throwing away an unwashed dish. The world you live in right now, the borders, the medicines, the food on your table, was shaped by moments like these. Moments so small they almost didn't happen. Almost. There are moments like this happening right now and today that nobody has noticed yet. Decisions being made, paths being taken or not taken. The next wrong turn, the next refusal, the next petri dish sitting on the next bench. History is not finished. It never is. If you want to keep exploring it, subscribe, because next time we find another 5 moments that changed everything. I will see you in the next one.